Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started. Before we kick off today's episode, I have to remind you that we are 1 week away from our subscription launching. So Monday, November 4th, in that episode's show notes, you will be able to go down, click a link to our subscription, and it will take you to one of 3 member models. You can become a level 1 member, which is you get a bonus episode, and that bonus episode will actually drop on November 4th. So you'll have immediate access to that. Level 2 members, you get the bonus episode plus a digest from myself and Dr. Kuba, where we give you all the resources that you need to execute that month's plan. And then level 3 membership, you get direct access to myself and Dr. Kuba. Once a quarter, every 3rd month, you get a phone call with myself or Dr. Kuba to ask us your questions, talk through drama, whatever way we can support you. So guys, 1 week from today, look at the show notes. Don't forget to sign up. I've got so many wonderful, amazing listeners. I expect for every one of you to be a part of our community. Okay, I'll let you tune in to today's episode. Dr. Smith, it's been a year. Can you believe that?
It has been a year, yeah.
A year since you've been on this show.
Yeah.
So it's time for you to be back. And now we get to glean all your wisdom. I already told you that I've got topics picked out for you because this month I started the podcast with my dad talking about vision. And I literally, as we were recording, I was like, okay, Smith, I got to tag him in on this. And so here we are, end of October, and we started the month talking about vision. I spent some time talking with Dr. Kuba about how a rotten apple on the team can kind of sway the vision in a negative way or can kind of get us off track with vision. And then we've talked about pivoting on major life things that come up that can cause us to pivot. And so I'm really hoping you'll help us round out this month and talk to us really kind of about all 3 of these, which I want to start with vision, because I feel like from the first time that I met you, which was over a decade ago, you had a very clear vision about what you wanted from a patient care standpoint, a patient experience standpoint. So how did you pick out that vision? What made you go in that direction?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And looking back, I started out working for corporate and was basically told what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I learned really quick, like the things I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, and watched how the practice run. It was a really good experience.
Yeah.
To work in a corporate office where all I had to do is go and get better at dentistry.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about insurance, learned a lot about these other things just from paying attention and watching, and how I wanted to treat people and how I wanted the practice to run and how I wanted things to go. And so when I decided to leave there and start my own practice, it was very much I wanted to leave the corporate part aside and focus on patients. And I've always felt like if you treated patients well, you treated them, with respect, you treated your team with respect, that everything would be okay.
Yeah.
And everything would come. And I don't market towards certain things or do try to do certain procedures. It's I market towards people and try to bring people into the office and then try to retain those people. And that's always been my biggest thing, is getting the people in and retaining them. What can we do to retain them? And it was funny, I was listening to your dad talking about vision, which was great. Really enjoyed meeting him at your Bethany launch, which I want to also say was also a great time. We had a great time doing that. But one thing that came to mind when he was talking about the vision is also your values. And getting your values right off the bat, I think is probably one of the most important things. And then you can build your vision and your mission off of those values. And so I put together my values, which I don't compromise at all. And I think that's what's kept through, is by not compromising these values. We went through these storms and ups and downs and all this stuff. And it was like, it'll be okay on the other side. Just keep moving forward. And I made changes. We pivoted. We changed things. We had to change things sometimes. Sometimes I changed things for the better. Sometimes it didn't work out. But at the end of the day, it was as long as we could do that without violating, my goal, my values, which are very simple. Which I'll tell you, we have six words basically. It's integrity, respect, quality, compassion, welcoming, and appreciation. And what I tell the girls is, we always practice with integrity. We always respect others. We always provide quality treatment. We always treat with compassion. We always create a welcoming environment to everybody. And we always appreciate the good that comes from the practice, which I think is very important, to appreciate things, because we always focus on the patients and the meltdowns and the things that didn't go so well. But a lot of really good things come from the practice as well. We help a lot of people. We do good things for the community. And it's a really important that we focus on those. And, sometimes it's just as simple as making sure we tell the whole team that somebody had a great day, then said great things about us. Maybe they wrote us a really good review. Maybe some, brought us donuts or brought us something, and everything. And it's just making sure that everybody is a part of that and appreciative of those things. And so we always make sure when somebody brings us something, we always send them, a thank you card, and we always do something to appreciate that. And so by building those values, then I built my vision, and then I built the mission, and have
I think
stayed with that.
that's so important. I'm so glad you brought up values, because I feel like we can dream big dreams, but we do have to have this foundational component of, even in these big dreams, no matter which twist and turn we decide to take from a vision standpoint, we don't want to compromise on the values. And so I think that's a key distinction that is important as we talk about vision, because your vision should be built on your values. And even these words, people sometimes will be like, well, what do you mean from a value standpoint? But saying we're always committed to quality dentistry, that's, when you think about that, it's no matter what change we make in the practice, even something down as simple as you and I want to say it was a couple years ago, we were standing in your storage closet looking at supply, because obviously we've had these huge swells and supplies and all of that, and you had made it a mission, you and your assistant, to find some key products but at lesser prices. And I remember you saying, even at that point, look at the quality, this is from this particular company that costs 3 times this. I ordered the same thing. Look at, and you're showing me, I think it was impression trays. Yeah. You're showing me these impression trays. You're it is the same thing. And so even that, it's you can decide, you can pivot with the times and go, okay, we've got these supply costs, but I'm not going to compromise on quality. And so you're going and you're shopping this, but you're comparing it to go, is this the same quality? Can I provide the same quality dentistry with this impression tray? And so I think those values are really foundational to everything.
Yeah. And I think, going to that example is, one thing that was important to us was things that just went in the trash, so suction tips, air water syringes, as long as it shot water out of it, then it was fine. As long as it suction spit, then it was good. As long as it was, it looked good, it didn't look dirty, things like that. And it's funny because a lot of the things we found were on Amazon at that time, because we couldn't find things, and a lot of the, even, Henry Schein was behind on stuff, Burkhart was behind on stuff, Midwest, all those people. And I was like, where do we get this stuff? And my assistant found almost the same exact stuff where it looks the same. Yeah. And I still use a lot of that stuff because we bought so much of it back then. But it was a quarter of the price, and it was just as good. And my thing was, okay, we're going to get this stuff in, and then half of them are going to break, or half of them are. And you know what? We didn't have any more than when I get the Henry Schein ones. Yeah. And, Henry Schein's still going up, and we still get some stuff from there. But impression trays, so it's plastic. I mean, it's not anything. But composite, I won't compromise that. Yes. I use one of the higher composites. I use higher impression material. One trick that we started doing, though, which has worked out great for me, is I use a very expensive light body, but I use the Henry Schein brand heavy body. And so we mix those together. And so saving the money on the heavy body allowed me to use a more expensive, better quality light body, which is where my crown margin comes from and everything. So, and yes, I still use old-fashioned impressions and do it the old-fashioned way, and it still works really well.
Well, but again, I think that goes back to, from a value standpoint, you're 100% committed to quality dentistry, but you're willing to kind of play around with some of the materials you might use to provide some savings, or something disposable that you're okay, I can compromise there to keep my profit margins the way that, but I'm not going to compromise on the quality. Right. I'm not going to cram a bunch of patients into the schedule in order to make my profit margin where it needs to be. I'm not compromising on that. So I've got to find other ways where I can kind of close that gap so that I'm not compromising on the quality dentistry aspect. So I think I'm so glad you brought your values in today, because I think those are pivotal I think they've been a guiding force for you, even your team. We recently reviewed these and we're like, remember, this is not only what we do, but this is why we do what we do. So right. I think those have been pretty critical.
Yeah, and I think it's very important. Anything we change, anything we do, I always mentally kind of look back and say, would it violate anything that's from this list? And as long as it doesn't, then hey, let's go for it. If it does, then it's like, hey, we need to rethink that. We need to do something different. So, and so from those values, then I got my mission and my vision, statement and everything. And I think if I have any advice for the listeners is just start with a core value of like what you want and what you see, you going for. And I think you mentioned in the last podcast, sometimes you just need to do short term. Like you don't need to look at 15 years in the future. What's short term? So like, what do you want to do right now? And that start building from that. And it's not something you're going to do tonight. Like it's going to take some time to really think through it, but it will benefit significantly. It helps the team because they know exactly. I mean, there's no surprises. They know this is what I believe. This is how it will stay. I will not violate those, and they know that. And it makes it a lot easier when they ask me to do something, or why don't we do this, or why. It's like, well, that doesn't fit with what I want to do. That's not how I do business. So
it makes it clear cut. It's like it's not just an opinion, their opinion versus yours. You can point to, well, this goes against something on my values or something against my vision, and I think that can clear things up quite a bit for team members.
And I think it's important to keep it simple. I mean, that's why I kept it simple with just a few things, and then we went into our vision, and then we went to our mission, and neither one of those are very long as well. I don't have this whole page long, vision. It's like a couple of sentences. My mission is one sentence. It's just like, just keep it simple and not try to do too much. It's a lot easier to follow it that way. And it's a lot easier to explain that to the team, and it's a lot easier for them to follow.
Yeah. So coming out of these strong values that you secured a long time ago, how do you feel like that has led you to the vision of the practice that you function in now?
What do you mean?
So obviously these are fantastic values to have, but I see these at play when I'm in your practice. I can see these very evidently at play. So how do you feel like, obviously we talked about quality dentistry, but something as simple as respect and integrity, like how do you feel like that's become a part of your vision for the actual patient experience?
Yeah, so I think we started with these 6 to be kind of, that's my core values. That's where we're going. And then to give you an idea, my vision is just to have a practice with firm foundations to build upon and continuously strive to grow and improve, to provide for the dental team and patients a good, comfortable, safe, and welcoming environment based on respect, compassion, and integrity, to continue to build strong relationships with the dental team and the patients of the practice. So I think one thing in that whole vision there is it combines both the team and the patients. Yeah. So the values were not just, as a thing to do for patients. I use that with my team as well. And, we don't violate these against each other. We don't violate these, I don't violate those against them. And so it was just important for me to have them have those values and to see those values at play and to treat people well. And then also to show it as an example, like to lead by example, continue to treat people well and keep doing those things. Good times, bad times, hard days, good days, whatever it was. It's like, it's not acceptable that we had a really bad morning, so you take it out on a patient later in the day, or a patient's very difficult. Well, some people are difficult. You don't know their experiences at home. And so let's give them the benefit of the doubt and let's still just take care of those people. Yeah. And it's funny that some of those people turn out to be your best patients. Yes. And they turn out to like send you stuff in the mail, and things. And, and it's like, and the girls know, like if we have a patient, we've had this several times lately, of patients that have had kids, or have gotten pregnant or have had surgery or have had unfortunate deaths. And the girls know there's a note on the calendar, and they go and they put it in there, and we send them flowers or cookies or something based off of based off of the situation.
Yeah.
That's not a marketing ploy. It's not it's just for us to, tell people that we care about them and we're sorry they're going through this, or we're happy for them that they're going through it, for the good things.
Right.
And that we're just here. And so it's not an attempt to gain a patient. It's just a value that we have, that we want to take care of people, and we want them to know it's more than just inside these walls. It expands out.
Right. Well, and again, I think that not only the value and the vision, it becomes, like you said, it's a distinguishing factor to go, we're going to do those things for the sake of growth. Mm-hmm. Or we're going to do those things for the sake of respect and integrity and welcoming and all of that. When that's the intention behind what you're doing, is really the vision and the values. Mm-hmm. So it's like there could be plenty of practices that send a congratulations baby gift, but it can be done for multiple different reasons. And so for your team to understand, no, the reason we do this is not just a marketing ploy. It's actually built off of the vision and the values that we have as a foundation. So I think even something as simple as that is built off of value and visions.
Right.
So one of the things I've got to ask you, because I feel like there's been so many times we've gotten together where either I'm pushing you to go in a different direction, which you love.
You promised me easy questions.
you love when I push you on things. But I also think you've really made some cool changes from what I would call a pivoting standpoint. You haven't changed on your values. You have not changed on your vision. Those things have been unchanging. But I think the actual technical application of those has changed. Mm-hmm. When I think through the years, like we're just coming out of one of our quarterly meetings, and we're talking about how even the nature of your practice has changed to be more heavier hygiene, not quite as much treatment. We talked about how that's a natural thing that happens in a nice, solid, maturing practice. And so we're seeing changes in your practice, which are really cool. But I think we've done a lot of pivoting through the years. So I'm going to give you an example of one to take you back a little bit. So pandemic, we were just laughing about this. Pre-pandemic, we spent this hours just building this really ornate marketing plan that was a dang good marketing plan.
Because you came up with it.
Yes.
So it was perfect.
It was a perfect plan. And so we had spent all this time coming up with this marketing plan because at that particular time, that is what we felt like your practice needed. We wanted to really push growth, and so we were coming up with marketing ideas. And then literally, I think the next month or the month after.
Oh, yeah, it was January or February, and then March the world ended.
Yeah. Pandemic hit, and we laughed, and we're like, we've never had to go back to that. Mm-hmm. Because there was something very natural that happened in your practice post-pandemic, which did not necessarily happen in all practices. And we talked about that a lot. You were one of my offices that tended to defy the trends as we walked in the post-pandemic world. And so one of the pivots that I feel like you made mentally was this mindset that we called feast or famine. Because you and I kept thinking the bottom was going to fall out at some point. Right. The rest of the dental world was experiencing kind of this lull or this slow rebound from the pandemic, and you did not experience that. You bounced back maybe more aggressively than I know it was more aggressively than I anticipated. And so you shifted your mindset to what I call the feast or famine mindset. You were willing to run not an overly busy schedule, but you were making a lot of schedule accommodations to take care of the patients because we really just didn't know when that was going to end. So even in that, you have this vision. The vision didn't change. The values didn't change. It's just the actual execution of it became different. And you became a doctor that was willing to, it wasn't work harder. It was just there was a lot more patients that you took care of during that period of time. Can you kind of walk me through what you remember from that period of time?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, I think every single month we talked about, well, it's not this month, so it must be next month that this is going to fall apart. And it's like, take advantage as long as you possibly can. And I think that's what we did. But, without, violating the values, we still got people in. We changed the templates multiple times, probably more times during those 2 years right after COVID than I had all my career, to start accommodating people, because we still didn't want to have so many people coming in that people had a bad experience.
Right.
And so I was like, how do we still treat people great? How do we still take really good care of them? How do we produce this environment? And I think a big part of it was the groundwork we laid before COVID kind of came back to us afterwards, that we had like, this is a safe place to come. This is good people here that are going to talk to you, that are going to take care of you. We're not going to push you in and out of the door. I mean, I remember little ladies coming in here and just sitting in the waiting room talking to people, you know, and I'm like, you really can't do that, but okay. You know, what am I going to do? Tell you to go home? Like, they had nothing else to do. Their highlight was coming to see the dentist and going to Walmart, you know? And so, you know, I think we did, as long as it wasn't creating an unsafe environment, we allowed people to come in and just treated them just like we did beforehand. I mean, before COVID, we took care of people. We, made sure we washed our hands. We made sure we wore gloves and masks, and, took all the precautions that you're supposed to. And we just did the same things afterwards. Yeah. And so nothing really changed. There wasn't a big difference there, but I think people just noticed it more and were more, kind of like we were talking about earlier. I think they were more, it was more at the front of their mind of not just getting treatment, but being in a safe environment that would take care of them. And that was very important to continue that with the team of like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to keep going. At some point this falls out, and then we'll address that when it comes. But until then, we need to get people in. We need to make changes so that we can accommodate people the best that we can. And on a daily basis, we kind of change that to something else. And, I'm like the last person that wants to change anything. I love the way things are going. I love autopilot. It just keeps going and life is good. And, we had to change a lot of things during those times. And then we have people leaving, and, for almost a year, I was cleaning teeth because we didn't have a hygienist. And, we could have shut that down and, not seen those people. But it was really important that we continue to see these people because I feel like it would be an injustice to them to not see them, to take care of them. So when they did come in, though, we were very honest with them. We'd be like, hey, we're short a hygienist. Dr. Smith is cleaning teeth today, but he's also seeing other patients too. It may just take a little bit longer. And I think as long as we were honest with people right from the front, right up front, then it changed the dynamic of the questioning of like, oh, well, what happened? Oh, well, I'm so glad that you're still seeing us today. Because a lot of people were having to cancel people and say like, I don't have enough room to see anybody because we didn't have any team members, because we were short hygienists, we were short assistants, we were short everything. And we just made it a point like, hey, we're just going to have to work a little bit harder to do it, but it'll pay off and it'll work. And what we found is like we never hit the bottom, never fell out.
we stopped saying that.
Yeah. If anything else, it just kind of keep, and now you're like, how do you grow more? And even though I don't want to, we keep doing it.
Yeah, well, and I do think it's interesting to, when you think of it retrospectively, I do feel like all the effort that you put in from a value standpoint, from a vision and mission standpoint, I do think that created a space for patients to come back, because they, even in a time that people were very scared about what was going on in the world, there was a trust here. There was a foundation of trust here that they knew they could come here and they were going to be well taken care of. They were going to be safe. There wasn't going to be anything that you were going to do that they didn't trust, and so I think that foundation served you really well. And then, despite all the crazy staffing changes that you went through during that time, we were in this feast or famine mindset, and so you kept the schedule open, you kept seeing patients and taking care of their needs when a lot of other offices weren't. And so I think it was like this perfect storm in a good way, because you had this foundation of trust. People felt really good about coming back, but then there was also capacity for them to come back. And so because we created that initial space, it served you really well. It kept serving you well. Like we just kept anticipating that it would stop at some point, but I think it just continued because it worked. That foundation of trust was there, the values were there and didn't change, and then you had capacity to serve these people. So I do think there was so much pivoting that happened, even for you, just psychologically. I feel like you flipped a switch that was like, no, we've got to accommodate these people.
I remember at one point telling the girls, today is the day we will not change anything.
Yeah.
And I say that a whole lot, and it just kept going and kept going and kept going. But it was and during that time I was super impressed with everybody. Like everybody adapted so differently and came up with all these ideas and different things to get around all the stuff that was going on during COVID. That like kept a lot of those things when we moved forward and got away from, all those rules we had to follow and all those things. It was like, well, some of these things were pretty good, and the template was better by making us have to do some of these things and making us recognize, all these spots that we needed for post-ops and the spots that we needed for these other stuff that were before just kind of sprinkled into the schedule. And it was like, no, we need a spot for every little appointment, which sounds super tedious, and it really is. But it's worth the time, but you just have to be willing to change it and adapt to it. And when this doesn't work, or these things are coming together, and it's causing an issue, again, breaking taking care of the patient. If this patient's staying too long because you can't get to this patient, you got to change the template. You got to do something different. And so we did that a lot. I think the template was the biggest thing during that time, and then just taking care of people, making phone calls to people, and it wasn't a way of we just wanted them to know, hey, we're here, we're open, we're here for you when you're ready. And I mean, what was it, 2, 3? I still have some patients come in that have not been in since 2019. But they're still coming in because they're finally feeling comfortable, or chaos happened, jobs got lost, things like that.
Right.
But they still remembered us and still came back. And I think that was, a big important part.
I think it was a foundation that you had built, not knowing that there was a pandemic in the future, but I think that foundation served you really well because y'all were so focused on the patient experience and what you wanted them to feel welcomed and cared for, that carried you through a lot of changes.
And it's funny, this is kind of a side note, but at the brunch I was talking to your dad, and he was telling me a story, and I won't tell it because it's his story, but basically he had come out of dental school, gone to work for somebody, and this person wanted him to do certain things and wanted him to stop doing some things, and it went on for a little while, and finally they he was like, this is who I am, and they parted ways, and he started his own practice. And so he's telling me the story, and I'm like, yeah, but do you feel like when you got to that point, you attracted people that were okay with the way you were doing things, and you attracted patients that were okay with the way you wanted to do things, and not forcing you to kind of do those things? And I was like, that's kind of what I was looking for. Is I wanted to do things the way that I was going to do them, and not compromise those things. And I've attracted team members that are okay with that. If they're not here anymore. Right. They've left. And I think that's really important too. I've heard Dr. Kuba talk about it. It's they're so afraid to fire people, and they're afraid. And I hate it. It makes me want to throw up to take somebody's job away from them. It's the worst thing. But at the same time, you can't be scared to do it. You have to do it because it's what's best for the practice, and it's what's best. And so you don't compromise these things, because if you have this rotten apple, you have this bad person, the other people need to know that you're going to take care of them by removing the rotten apple from their environment.
Right.
Where if you continue to let that person, they're all going to turn into rotten apples, because they're going to be like, well, if she's getting away with it, why can't I do this? She doesn't show up on time, so whatever. And so when I put on to it, I'm like, you're required to be here on time. All of my team members are here on time every single day. It's just a culture that we have created. No one's late, or if they're late, they're calling every single person on the team. I overslept, I'm on my way, I need this done. Dr. Smith has this patient here, can somebody set that up for me real quick? Trying to, and I don't even ask them to do that, but they just know that that's their job, and and things are going to happen. And I, of course, make a comment hey, you were late today, not cool, let's not do that again, but unless it becomes a habit, I don't do it. But it's they kind of self-police themselves in that case. Yeah,
because again, the expectations are clear. Mm-hmm. They know this is unacceptable, or this is
I think the expectations have to be clear.
They have got to be clear.
You have to have clear expectations. This is what's important to you. This is what I believe in. So therefore, get on board, or you need to remove yourself.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah.
And I think that I have people, every time I hire somebody, well, Dr. Jones did it this way, or Dr. blah blah did it this way, and I was like, well, this is not Dr. Jones. This is Dr. Smith, and this is how I do things, and it doesn't change. And then when the team backs it up of saying, yes, this is how Eric does things, he is very much plays rock and roll music all day, shows up on time, takes care of patients. We'll sit and talk to them forever in the room, so we need a backup plan. But it's like I also give the team a lot of autonomy as well with that. And I think that's very important too.
Yes.
I'm definitely not a micromanager, even though I think they might feel that way sometimes. I don't go sit in my office. You can't find anything in my office right now. I hate sitting in my office, so I will wander around the office and I will talk to everybody and I'll do, but it's also kind of reminding them that like I'm here, like I'm paying attention to what's going on, but they also have a lot of autonomy. And we had this issue today. I had a patient who has had a tough time. She's been a patient forever, and she was just talking. She really was just talking to me. And, they're not standing behind me, like, tapping their watch, and stuff. My assistant went and got a room and put the hygienist patient in there. The hygienist left me and went and did her x-rays and started doing all this stuff. And then came back in here. And then I'm figuring out what's going on. I figure out that we're running behind, we're getting really close to that. And so I'm like trying to wrap this up. And then I walk the patient out and the assistant comes in and flips the room. And then the hygienist moves the patient from 5 into her room.
Yeah.
And it was like, I didn't have to tell them that. They knew from that, like, that patient that was waiting needed to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. How can we take care of that patient? Well, the best thing is to get them back. And then, they need x-rays, so let's go ahead and get the x-rays. Let's do this. But it's because we've done it so many times. And, before I had to tell them to do that. Now they know, this is what Dr. Smith's going to want us to do. And so this makes sense, then let's do that.
Yeah.
And I've done some things sometimes, and afterwards I have to okay, I see where you guys were going. Thank you for trying. But that was the awful way to do that. Let's not do it that way again. So.
Note to self, this is not a good execution of the plan.
That was the wrong way. But I'm really glad you were trying, So.
I also am thinking of a time, so obviously pandemic time, I feel like you definitely pivoted in so many ways. But also, I guess it was, I'm trying to think about maybe last year or the year before, where we were, 2 or 3 years post-pandemic, and we're like, well, I guess this bottom's never going to drop out. I think we're okay. I think this is going to stay for a while. I think this is the new normal. And so thankfully, because everything was so stable, the practice was in really good shape from a financial standpoint. And so in one of our conversations, I started to really ask you questions about what you wanted out of the schedule. And so talk us through some of the changes that you've made, at least from your work schedule, and how have you made changes in your family life that have been beneficial with recent changes.
So you're talking about taking off more time. Yeah. So Bethany has forced me to take more time off. So I needed a push off the cliff to get there. And I think it was because, and you come back to these values, and it was like, I felt like I needed to be here. I felt like that's my job. I should be here. It's not like I neglected my family at all. Like they were great taken care of. It's really great. I always like to tell the patients that are having their first kid, this old guy, probably one of my first patients way back in the day, told me this story about one thing that he did. He worked out of town a lot, and he would set up one day a month with each one of his kids for a date night. Yeah. And I'm like, that's genius. I love this idea. We still do this. Me and Bailey go on a date night, and me and my son do. And they're totally different date nights because Lucas wants to go hit baseballs or go do something like that. And Bailey wants to go to some dinner and dress in a dress and, all that stuff. But it's, those things have always been important to me. But when we started the practice, I had to work. And I had to, see people. And there for a while I was working 6 days a week because I'd work here, and then I would work in another office 2 days a week. So I was working Monday through Saturday, and then, it was a means to get to where we wanted to get. Yeah. But even after that, I think I really struggled with taking off because I felt like I neglected people. Mm. And then once you kind of talked me off that ledge and got me to do that, what I learned is when I did take off extra time, the world didn't end. Everything was fine. I like to say that all the time now because it's everything. It's the world didn't end. It's fine. But it was, I took a little extra time off at Christmas to start with. I'm like, this was nice. And I still produced the same amount of money that I did, and everything kind of worked out. Because you just got to reschedule, or, redo the schedule, change the template up again a little bit to accommodate all those people to get them in before you leave. And the same thing, I took off spring break 2 years for the first time the whole week. Took it off last week too, plan on doing it again this week. Yeah. And I have not seen March suffer from it. I get some people complaining and whining, why don't you take off? But it's really not very many people. It's really not. And those people still come in on other days. And we're still booking people 6 months out. So, it's like, well, if you still really want to come at 4, like we still have one the next week when I'll be back.
Right.
Or this year's even better because my wife has spring break one week and my kids have spring break a different week. And so that's been challenging. So I'm taking like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off one week and Monday, Tuesday off the next week to kind of give me that break there. But the hygienists are still going to work some of that, but then we're going to take off some of it. But I find that it's just, so far it's worked out well, and it's really great. We were talking about it today. I just got back from Disney this weekend.
Yeah.
And we got back on Monday, but my kids still had today or Tuesday and today off. Yeah. And so I took off yesterday, and I could have come in. I was sitting at my house, but I didn't, and they handled everything fine, and that's a big part of it too. I trust them to handle it right and take care of things and do things because that's what we do on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And if I see that not be the case, which has happened before, which had stopped me from letting them work on days that I was out, because I found out that they moved patients around and they did things, and 2 people lost their jobs off of that. And number one, they learned real quick, like don't break the rules, but also it was like this is important. And then I took that away and didn't let them until just lately. And really it's a capacity problem, right? We don't have enough. Take off this much time, I don't have enough spots for people, so I have to let the hygienist work. But yeah, I mean, I got here this morning and they were like, oh yeah, everything went great yesterday, I need you to look at XYZ patients and, these kinds of things. And we just kept the day going, and it was great. Today was a busy day, but it was it all worked out fine. So I think it's important, and I do tell other people that it's like, I was afraid to take these off because I was like, oh, I'm gonna lose patients. Oh, people are gonna think I'm just always playing golf, which I don't do. But no, it's been fine. Yeah. And people understand, and I think again, building those relationships with those people, it's funny how many people told Stephanie that were like, oh, I'm glad Dr. Smith's taking some time off, instead of like, oh, why is he gone? So it's always good to hear things like that like, these foundations that you built on, like, really will come back at some point. And of course, we've been doing it for 15 years now, so it's not like it happened overnight. But from day one, that's what I started to build. And now I think going through the pandemic, we really saw how important that was. Mm-hmm. And then you reflect back a little bit before that, and there were things there too that you just didn't pick up on as much. But the pandemic was such a influence on everything that you saw how, like, the way we had done things. And I think last podcast we talked about a hygienist that I brought in that you were like, I don't think she's going to work out. And I was like, well, let's see if she sinks or swims, and let's try her out. And, she had a lot of upside, but she had a lot of downside. And there were a few little things, and after a few little very pointed conversations, like, she jumped right in, and she actually loved working here, and actually told me like this was her favorite office that she ever worked at. But she had never done any of the other stuff that like we were asking her to do. Right. And I think the team being so, they all just naturally did it, that she came along and did it. So
she calibrated relatively quickly.
Within about a month. So it just took her changing my radio station one time.
Should we add that to the values?
Don't touch the radio station. Touch my radio station. Yeah, you probably should.
Oh, I do think, it's interesting when we think about these different phases of life that we go through, that we can look back, like you said, and see real clear moments in time where we see clearly the practice, the values, the mission. We can see these pivotal moments that kind of change the trajectory of the practice, or at least the mindset. Like, I feel like before you really were such a solid straight line person, like, this is the plan, we're going to follow that plan. And not that COVID broke that with you, but it's like you had to harness a different power in yourself, which is this mindset of like, it's going to be okay, and we're going to pivot, and we're going to make this change, and that it's all going to be okay. And then that, I feel like, led you to this point where you could start to grapple with this idea of not being here as much, and really affording yourself the luxury of more time with your family. And then even now, probably a couple years into this, you're like, and that's working out just fine, you know? So it's like all these little things, these fears that we have of, is it going to be okay if I do X, Y, Z? And I would say in most cases, when you've got a good plan, you really can make changes that work out to be favorable. And not that you'll always stay with this particular phase of life. Your kids are young and growing, but they're not going to be in the house forever. You may reach a point where you're like, okay, you know what? I don't need to take off every spring break and every Christmas break. So it doesn't necessarily mean that will stay forever. But at least for this period of time, you've really given yourself the freedom to have the same values, the same vision. You're just executing slightly differently during times of the year, and that's been really fun to see that change for you.
Yeah, and it's been great too, and it's great to get away, and I definitely had more fun going to Disney this weekend than being in my practice for sure.
Yeah.
But and today was a tough day, but it was great because I've had a couple of days off, and it's energizing. It's good. It's really good for the soul. It's really good to get away some too. And I think it's easy for me to Monday morning quarterback and go back and say, man, I should have done this a long time ago. But I also get the reason why a lot of people don't, because it's hard. It's hard to do it. It's hard when, if the handpiece isn't running, you're not making money, and it's, but at the end of the day, it all turned out okay. It was all good.
And I would say, a fascinating phenomenon from all of that is the practice hasn't gone down. We were just sitting and looking at numbers together, and despite these changes, the practice has stayed more profitable year over year. Even with the time off, which is always like mind blowing. You're like, how can that be that I would, in 2024 take off maybe 5 or 6 more days off compared to 2023, and yet it produces the same amount. But it's because we know going into it, okay, we're going to be disadvantaged this month because of spring break. So how can we make up for that on the weeks surrounding spring break? So it's just a different mindset, and the fact that I could pull on so many of my clients that I've been like, take more time off, and they're like, oh, I can't, and then they do, and somehow the numbers still make sense. So it kind of is that leap of faith, and I feel like you are a testament to not only having to pivot during COVID and after COVID, and then this pivot I feel like that you made a couple years ago of, okay, I'm gonna take more time off, and we're gonna see what happens, and here we are. It's working just fine.
And it worked out fine, and life didn't end, as I always say, and it's great. But I think it still comes back to building the culture, and so which I have spent a long time trying to build a culture here with the team and with everybody. That's really great. And I think one of the things we've talked about before was when my dad passed last year. I was out of the office for 3 weeks, and when I came back, I didn't have to ask the girls to do anything. I didn't have to, they just took care of things. And I came back with multiple stacks of papers, and it was like, okay, these are the important things that you need to address now. Yeah. These are some things that we had with some patients we need to take care of. Here's your, these are all the, notes from doctors, referral notes, things like that and stuff. And we need you to go, through these things. But they were like, they could have just threw all those together, but they they put them in a way that made it a lot easier for me to come back and just start working again, work through all that thing, because 3 weeks worth of stuff, it was a ton of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't in the mood to do it anyway, and so they just made it really easy for me. And again, I didn't ask them to do it. They just felt like they should do it. And we were kind of talking about at lunch today of, trying to get them to schedule their time off, when I'm gone. And I'm like, it's really not a problem because, one, we have a very small team. If you haven't listened to my other podcast, I only have 2 hygienists, 1 assistant, and 1 front office. And so it's a very small team. And so when one of them is gone, it affects everybody. Yeah. And so it's not just that it affects me, and so therefore you should not do it. It's like it affects everybody. Your friends over here are not going to, they're going to struggle. Somebody's going to have to pick up the slack. And so I think they do make a conscious effort to try to take off, when times are slower, when I am gone, or, Wednesdays afternoons when we don't work as late or anything like that. And so it's almost like, again, coming back to that, they have the autonomy and they kind of self-police themselves, because that's what I've worked really hard to make sure that they do. And people that didn't follow those rules, I got rid of them and picked up somebody else until we got the core there. And now I think it's strong enough that when you bring somebody in, they come into the team, and it's kind of like sink or swim, because you need to do that for them, not as much for me, which is really even a better dynamic in my opinion to have that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it gives hope to those out there that may be early in their process of building a vision or a culture or even values. Just stick with it. It's like, yes, there's all these pivots that we talked about, but when you've got this focus and you reiterate that and you bring your team up on that, you get rid of the rotten apples that won't acclimate to that culture. It's like there is this beautiful spot you can get to, and not without problems. It's not like you're walking in every day without problems. There's plenty of problems that are going to smack you in the face, but it's like you really can get to this sweet point where for the most part, most days go well, and your team polices themselves and achieves the mission. Just stick with it. Like, don't give up on that.
I think they used to have a plan, and when something happens, you step outside the plan, you solve that problem, and then you come back to your plan. And like we were talking about, I mean, we've got great AC right now because I just bought a new AC unit, and two of my units in the back broke all in the same month. Like, it was like, I think it ended up being $25,000 right there that we had to break. Like, I didn't want to do that. No. Not on the heels of going to Disney also. And everything. But it's like, that it happened, and we needed to solve the problem. We paid for it. We moved on, and now it's you go right back to where we were. And it's like, so I think the pivoting on those things are important, but it's also these things are going to hit you that you're not expecting, and things are going to happen. You can't control everything. Trust me, I would love to, but it's just not going to happen. But you can't let those things affect you so much that you lose control of what's going on for the rest of the day, or for the rest of the month, or for the rest of whatever. It's like, it's one of those things. Let's fix it. Let's move on. Let's get back to work. Kind of deal. And that's how it is.
Yes, it's like the Google Map reroute. Just a quick little detour, and then you get right back on the same road, and you're fine. So I think that's so important to not lose track of the road that you're on, the path that you've got in your mind. There may be these little wrecks that pop up that you have to reroute for a moment, but it's like you get back to the same track, and don't let those wrecks take you to a completely different town. Keep going on the path that you need to get back on, and that there's hope. That you're 15 years into this, and I feel like the practice, and you as a professional, you're just in a really sweet spot of enjoying the fruits of your labor. So for those earlier in the game, or for those that have been like, oh gosh, I'm on the path to Hades, it's like you can get back on track and go back to those values, go back to that vision, go back to your core, and then rebuild from there.
And I think the biggest thing is just remembering this is why you're doing this. Like, we all went to dental school for a really long time. We invested so much into these practices. We deserve to be happy. We deserve to have, and it's kind of like what I was talking to with your dad. It's like, he said, like, once I started my own practice, like, I run it the way I want to, and I was like, that's what I feel like I've really strived to do. He's just many years ahead of me, but that's what I wanted to do, was run the practice the way I wanted to, keep it that way. I didn't want to run it like a corporation. I didn't want to run it like numbers going through. And if that's your thing, that's great. Like, you have to have your thing, and I think that's the big thing. Is like, don't take my values and try to build off of those. You sit down and think of what your values are, and how you want to run the practice, and how you want to do things. And I have a different opinion on a lot of different things, and you may have different opinions than some of your colleagues. I always tell you, like, I don't have any friends in the field. They're all in different things, because once I leave here, I want to be done, and I want to go do other stuff. But sometimes I feel like I'm out here on this island, and I'm always asking you, like, well, what's everybody else doing? Like, I have no idea, because I just don't know. I don't get to go into a lot of other offices, and so, but as I think it starts with getting those values, getting your vision, getting your mission statement. I also think it's very important to build a culture, and like, we don't have time to get into all of that stuff, but things that I've done to try to build a culture here. With the personalities. You've talked a lot about personalities. That's really important to me. I make everybody do the personality test, so I kind of know how to approach them. I approach people differently based on that, because certain things work for some people, certain people don't. And there's certain things that I do on a daily basis to try to just let them know, like, hey, I'm here, this. And I think when you build a really good culture that they want to be in, people want to be there, and they want to work here, and they want to come to work on time. They want to show up. And I always start with a story. Every time I hire hire anybody. And then I tell the story from time to time just to kind of remind the girls of this has been many, many years ago. My daughter was 3 years old, and it was her birthday, and it was like one of those weird ones where the birthday's in the middle of the week, and so you don't really have time to go do anything. So we had promised her we would take her to the Rainforest Cafe. That's what she wanted to do. She was 3, and but like we wanted to do something for her that night, so we went to another restaurant. And we got awful service. Like, they took forever to get to our food. It was just awful, right? And so my wife said something to them and everything, and it was kind of like, well, we just don't have enough people. Like, it was like super rude. Didn't offer anything, in return of like us waiting forever for this restaurant that should have been really fast. And then on the weekend, we go to Rainforest Cafe, and lo and behold, the guy taking our order forgets to put our order in. So we were sitting there for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes, which we really don't care because the monkeys are going off and all this stuff and everything. But even like, I'm like, it's been a while since we got our food. The manager come by and he goes, you guys have been here a long time. Like, we're like, did you guys order something? I was like, I don't know. So he went and found the waiter, comes back to us and tells us like, I am so sorry, but something happened. It didn't get entered into the computer correctly, so they didn't get it in the back. But I'm going to bring you guys some chips. And then we're gonna get the order in as fast as we can, blah blah blah, stuff. And I was like, oh well, that's great, And he did. He brought us some chips, and then we got our food. And somehow I came up that it was Bailey's birthday, and he's like, I got you. I'm gonna get you. We'll take care of this. And next thing I know, he's bringing out the big volcano. If you've been eating it, there is this big giant brownie that's huge with a little sparkler on it and stuff. And he sits there and belts out happy birthday to my daughter right there, singing to her, And I always like to tell that story because it's like you see one side where the customer service totally failed. I can't remember last time we went to eat at that restaurant. My daughter was 3 and she's 14 now.
Yeah.
And like Rainforest Cafe, it's like, yeah, they screwed up, but like they were honest. They took up for it, and then they made up for it afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I always tell the girls that story, when they first start. We always go through it in the morning meetings when we've had some tough times. We're like, this is how we want to treat people. Everything is not going to turn to gold. Everything's not going to be perfect. We're not going to be able to make everybody happy. But we need to take care of people when we can.
Yeah.
And when we do make a mistake, things don't go as well, whether it's our fault or not. It's making up for it in some way without, again, compromising our values.
Exactly. It all goes back to that being the vision and repeating that story and making sure that the team is always on board with that, and especially with those new hires. Like, this is what we're about. I think it sets that expectation from the beginning.
New hire gets to hear it right off the bat, and my assistant who's been with me for 5 years has probably heard that story 10, 15 times now. But I think it sets the precedent like that's important enough to me. Then it sets up like today when we had the little meltdown. We had some issues and we got behind, and they solved the problems and it turned out great. And we were right back in, and the patient didn't even notice because at the end of the day she was out on time.
Right.
And that's really what she cared about was, she was not here late. We started a little bit late on, but she got out on time, so she was happy.
She was none the wiser. Yeah.
So she was happy when she left. Yeah. So.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you back 1 year later. So apparently this is going to be an annual thing. Right. October's your month. Like it's a month I think of you.
Pencil it in for 2025.
But I do appreciate you just, again, sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey. I have no doubt that it will be encouraging to people to just, again, get focused on that vision and stay focused on it. Just don't waver. It can pay off. You're sitting here 15 years later, I think, experiencing the fruits of a lot of effort that's gone into it. And
it will. And then there'll be lots of times it'll be really easy to detour from it.
Yeah.
And it'll be really easy to move on it. And if you just stay on that path, every time it has benefited me and it's come back. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it always comes back tenfold versus if I would have made decisions based on the times and what would have been easy at that time.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't always the easiest thing to do, but it always worked out.
Yeah. Don't compromise.
No.
I love it.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover.
As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.